Now, if you've ever witnessed a car accident, if you've ever been in that place of extreme trauma, things are coming at you so fast that the brain can't bring in information fast enough to make sense of it. I call it, trying to make logic out of illogical situations. That's where my brain was. I thought, my God, this has got to be a fraternity joke, right? I mean, this has got to be some stupid guy, no offense men, but some stupid guy who says to himself, this would be really funny. Except then I realized I lived 3.5 miles from campus. People didn't know I lived there. All I did was study and work and study and work. Then I thought, my God, this is a break-in. A person's been robbing me. He's in the middle of the robbery. I'll offer him everything I own. Please don't hurt me. I promise I'm not going to call the police. You can just take everything, just leave, but don't hurt me. Having no idea he had already cut my phone lines. And he said, I don't want your money. And it was at that moment that I realized that I was in terrible danger. My sister and I had gone for a walk the week before. She's 3 years younger than me. We went to the same college, and we had this conversation that women have. And she said to me, Jennifer, what would you ever do if you knew you were going to be raped? I said, I've never really thought about that. What would you do, Janet? She said, well, I would scratch his eyes, I would bite him, I would vomit on him, I would punch him, I would kick him, I would fight. And I said, well, I've heard that if you stay calm, you might live. And that conversation came back to me that night as I reconciled what was happening. And here's the things that go through your brain. You start thinking about how you'll die. You start wondering, will it hurt? You start thinking, will it be fast? Will it be over? Will I not know I'm dying? Will it take a long time before I die? And then you think about the people you love. And I remember thinking to myself, I just need to tell my father one more time how much I love him. I need to thank my parents for everything. I need to see the sun come up one more time. And then I started worrying about what it was going to be like for my parents to come and identify my body, and what that moment would be like as they stood over me in the morgue and had to say, yeah, that's Jennifer. And those are the thoughts that go through your mind. And then something happened in my brain. And I remember thinking, I may die, but it won't be like this. I might die, but it won't be on my back. And I began to make a plan. I made a plan that if I survived, I would know who you are, and I would pay attention to everything I could look at. I began to study his features in those moments when I could see his face. I remember paying attention to his voice as he began to tell me things like, you can't see me because you're not wearing your glasses. You're from that town where they burn witches, thinking Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and Salem, Massachusetts were the same place. He began to say things like, you miss your boyfriend, don't you? He had been reading postcards from my brother Joe as he was backpacking through Europe, and they were all signed, Love, Joe. And it had become very clear to me he'd been in my apartment for quite some time, drinking beers and smoking cigarettes. He had stolen my money. He had taken a photograph out of a photo album of me so he could have a souvenir of his victim. And all of those things became very clear throughout the assault. At one point, he tried to kiss my mouth, and I remember turning my head because I was going to vomit, and I didn't want to die choking on my vomit. But that would be an action that would save my life, when he would say to me, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you. And for some reason, that I can't explain, except I do believe it was a higher spirit working on my behalf. I said, I have a phobia of knives. If you'll get off of me and walk down the front steps, and if you'll drop the knife on my car and I can hear it hit the metal, I'll let you come back in. And he looked at me very strange and he said, really? And I knew for just a moment the power had shifted. It wasn't a lot, but it was important. And I said, I promise, please get off of me. I pulled a blanket that was on the edge of my bed and I wrapped it tight around my body as I got up from the bed, because I knew the police were going to ask me questions such as, how tall was the perpetrator? How much did he weigh? What were his clothes? Those were all questions I'd be asked, and I needed to have the answers. So I needed to stand close enough to him to find out, how tall was this man? I'm 5'1". He's 5'11", maybe 6 feet tall. I'm 105 pounds. He was probably 175, 185 pounds. 21, 22 years old, light-skinned African-American male. He had short pencil-thin mustache and close-cropped hair. I remember looking for things like tattoos or scars or piercings or missing teeth, something that I could identify that he couldn't alter later on. It became paramount to my very survival. He was wearing khaki fatigue pants and slip-on canvas boat shoes that were dark in color, like navy blue or black. He had a dark blue shirt that was 3/4 length sleeves with 3 white stripes that went across his biceps. White knit gloves that were like a child's gloves. They ended right at his wrist. These were all important things for me to remember. He pretended to drop the knife out of my apartment and came back in and grabbed me and said, let's go. And I wouldn't go back in that room. I would die before he ever touched me again. Can I just have a moment to go to the bathroom? I just need a moment, please. And he said, yeah, hurry up. As I went into the bathroom, I turned the light on just for a second before he yelled at me to turn it off. But it was important. The light was important. I would be asked that question. How much light did you have? I went in the bathroom and I began to pray and think about how was I going to survive this. I couldn't fit through the window. It was too small and it was a huge drop down to the cellar and I would probably break my legs. And then I remembered he said he had come through my kitchen, through the back door. I had to get to the back door because maybe his way in would be my way out. So I came out and I said, can I have a glass of water first? And he said, yeah, make me a Seagram's and we'll have a party. I said, okay, I'll make you a drink. And as I went past him, he was turning on my stereo looking for 98.7 KISS FM because we were going to have a party. But when he turned on the stereo, a light came on, a blue light that illuminated his profile. And again, it was another piece of information I could glean and I could remember as I went into my kitchen and quickly turned on my light because I knew it would keep him away from me. It would give me 5 seconds. It would give me 10 feet, but I needed that. And I began to make noise with ice cubes hitting my sink and cabinet doors opening and closing and running the water. And I pulled my blanket tight and I opened the door and I ran. It's 3:30 in the morning now, and it's dark, and it's now raining, and I have nothing on but a blanket, and I don't run. I thought I'll go next door to my neighbor's house, and I'll knock on his door, I'll pound on the door, he'll be there, he'll save me. He'll let me in, but I didn't know he was gone for the weekend. And as I was banging on the door, I looked over my right shoulder and I could see him coming out the door after me, and he was angry, and I knew that I was going to die. So I did the only thing that made any sense to me, and I took off through the neighborhood, and I headed to the only thing, which was light. If I could get to the light, if I could get to some light, maybe somebody's driving by, somebody will see me, maybe they'll call the police and they'll save me. So I saw a carport at a house. I jumped the dog fence. I landed in the carport. I began to bang on the back door, screaming at the top of my lungs, please let me in. Please, I've been raped. Please, he's after me. He's behind me. Please let me in.